Wholesaler Masterminds is so much more than this podcast that you've been enjoying, and I'll bet you know that. But did you know that we have a 6-month coaching program that we've been doing for the better part of 6 years? Over the course of that 6-month period of time, we're going to power wash your practice. If you're an experienced wholesaler with 20 plus years of wholesaling experience, we're going to look in the nooks and crannies, look at the details of your practice, make sure that we can improve where improvements need to be made. And if you're a new wholesaler, if you've been wholesaling for 2 years versus 20, we're going to help you set in place habits and behaviors that will carry you through to the next 20 years. If you want more information about Wholesaler Masterminds Priority Partner Coaching, please hit us up at the website wholesalermasterminds.com. Click on the contact link, send us a message. wholesalermasterminds.com, Priority Partner Coaching.
Wholesalers, if you've been listening to the show for any period of time, if you've been tuning into wholesalermasterminds.com, you know that we talk about your peerless value proposition. We talk about how you can stand out from the sea of sameness. What are you going to do to differentiate yourself against the pack? And that's why when our guest today wrote a new book, I wanted to get him on the line. Today we're going to talk to Jay Baer.
Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore.
Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. Jay Baer has spent 25 years in digital marketing and customer experience, consulting for more than 700 companies during that period of time, including 34 of the Fortune 500. His current firm is Convince and Convert. It provides word-of-mouth digital marketing and customer experience advice and counsel to some of the world's most important brands. He's got a brand new book, just read it over the weekend. It's called Talk Triggers. It's a complete guide to creating customers using strategic and operational differentiators that compel word of mouth. He's a newly inducted member of the Speaker Hall of Fame, and I could rattle on about his accolades because he is a fixture in social media and word of mouth and digital marketing. But rather than doing that, I'm just going to invite him to join us. Jay Baer, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Fantastic to be here, my friends. Thank you very much. Hello, wholesalers. Great to spend a little time.
What's a talk trigger, Jay?
Talk trigger is a strategic operational choice that you make in your business that compels word of mouth. It's something that you choose to do differently, that your customers remember and talk about. And when they do that, it turns your customers into volunteer marketers, which makes your job as a salesperson much easier.
So one of the things you talk about in the book is the difference between this and the unique selling proposition. And our peerless value proposition is a fiber of what we work with wholesalers about. And it's a kissing cousin, if you will, to a unique selling proposition, but somewhat different. But how does a talk trigger differentiate from whatever the acronym would be?
Yeah. I think your PVP, your peerless value proposition, is more what my friend Tom Webster would call the theory of the firm. It is at the molecular level, the DNA level. Like what really are you all about? A unique selling proposition is often much more academic in terms of you are strategically, this or that. A USP is a bullet point that you might talk about in a conference room. A talk trigger is a story that you'll tell in a bar. It's much more about not you versus your competition. It's much more about feeding your customers a story that they will repeat on your behalf. And that story has to be interesting, right? Nobody likes to tell boring stories. So a talk trigger, first and foremost, has to be something remarkable. And the true definition of that word, Rob, which is worthy of remark.
So, but before we get into the 4 R's, because I want to talk about that.
Sure.
And also want to talk a little bit about a few of the 5 T's of what makes talkable talk triggers. There's a phrase you use. I had a boss a long time ago whose favorite phrase was, differences sell, similarities don't. You say same is lame.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, some of this is just physiology. It's science. As human beings, we are wired to discuss things that are different and ignore things that are average. And as you said in the introduction, I've been doing this a long time, and one of my observations in my now lengthy business career is that in business, especially B2B, especially financial services, we are all guilty of plain follow the leader, of saying who is doing this pretty well, what elements of their operations can we mimic because it seems to be proven and it's reduction of risk, etc. But nobody talks about what they expect. They talk about what they don't expect. The more you try to fit in, the more your customers will simply tune out. So while plain follow the leader might be operationally sound or might be a good way to retain customers, it's most definitely not a good way to spark conversations.
There's two core stories that you open the book with, one of which I'd like to focus on if we could, not to the exclusion of the other if you want to go
Sure.
there, but I want to talk about DoubleTree Hotels, and I'd like you to tell the story, if you would, to our audience about the talk trigger of DoubleTree Hotels, because since these are all traveling folk, that is the one that they certainly will relate to most.
Yeah, it's one of the more effective and successful word-of-mouth strategies ever devised in American business. They, at DoubleTree Hotels, have given out a warm chocolate chip cookie at check-in to every guest every day for 30 years. Today, as we're having this conversation, they will distribute approximately 75,000 cookies on this day worldwide. It's a lot of cookies. Now, many of the folks listening who have been to a DoubleTree will remember the cookie now that they've heard me tell. They're like, oh, yeah, the cookie. And you might think that's interesting, but you might think, well, that doesn't actually build their business. Yeah, but it does. We did 4 separate research projects for this book, my co-author Daniel Lemon and myself, and one of the research projects we undertook was a comprehensive survey of DoubleTree guests. We talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and we discovered that 34% of them have, without being asked or aided or prompted in any way, told somebody else a story about that cookie in the past 30 days. So if you do the math on that, what it comes up to is approximately 25,500 stories per day told about that cookie. Now, a companion question. When's the last time you saw a DoubleTree ad?
When last time I saw a DoubleTree ad, almost never.
Right, almost never, because the cookie is the ad. The guests are the marketing department, and that's what happens when you have an effective talk trigger. See, there's a saying in business. It's not entirely true, but it's true enough. And it goes like this. Advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable.
Say that. Let's say that back one more time. Advertising is the tax paid by the unremarkable. Mm-hmm.
It's not entirely true, but it's true enough. And the fact that DoubleTree doesn't have to spend much on advertising because their customers continue to tell this cookie story every day, I think explains all you need to know about the economic impact of a successful talk trigger and a word-of-mouth strategy.
Now, the other one that I know that you talk about, and I can't not talk about it because it is so compelling. So there's a certain restaurant chain that has a menu that is, a third as long as your entire book, and your book is 270 some words. So tell us more about that. 270 some pages, pardon me. Yeah.
Yes, it is a restaurant that makes chicken 85 different ways.
85 different ways. So to be a server...
Which is a third, actually. I mean, like if we said, hey, email in your list of chicken recipes, nobody listening can do 20. Right? No. 85 is a lot.
No, and to be a server there is to almost
worst job ever.
Oh yeah, to be painful. But go ahead.
Are you guys ready to order? No, you should go on break.
Exactly.
We're totally not ready.
I'll be here reading. Thank you.
Yes, we're not already. It's the Cheesecake Factory. And the Cheesecake Factory restaurant is incredibly successful business. Some of the highest sales per square footage of any restaurant chain in America. They spend 5 times less than any other restaurant chain in their core competitive set on advertising. They just don't advertise. And one of the reasons that they can get away with that is their talk trigger, which is this massive, overwhelmingly detailed menu. As mentioned, they make chicken 85 different ways. The menu itself is 5,940 words long, which is a third as long as the book, or 13% as long as the book. It takes a long time to get through. I mean, they make all the foods. There's no foods that they don't make, pretty much. And similarly to DoubleTree, Daniel and I did a survey of hundreds and hundreds of Cheesecake Factory guests and patrons and discovered that 38% of them have told somebody else specifically about the menu in the last 30 days. And similarly to DoubleTree, they just don't spend any money on advertising because the Talk Trigger does that acquisition work for them.
You know, Jay, one of the things I like about your book is that not only does it have the conceptual, the theoretical, but also, and sometimes I guess I listen to your cadence and how you speak and can almost surmise from that and watching your Twitter feed and having met you once that you're also a bit of a nerd, if I may say that in a complimentary fashion, that there's a ton of data to go with all of this too, right? I mean, there just wasn't, I just want to offer that as an ancillary compliment and comment to this conversation.
Thanks. I mean, look, this is my 6th business book, and I, of course, read tons and tons of business books, and what I didn't want is a book that was Jay and Daniel say that you should be better at word of mouth. Because, frankly, there's a bunch of books like that already.
Oh, this is a great segue, though. You say, and I love this one, you say that word-of-mouth marketing is the kale of business.
Yes.
It is. Yes. Now, remember, or maybe you don't know, because I know you live in the Midwest. I live in Northern California, so be careful what you say about kale. But please proceed.
Right. Yes. I would say, on balance, there are many people who know that kale is good for you, but do not embrace it in the same way that they might in your region. You know, like you would be hard pressed to find somebody who says word of mouth is unimportant.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to make that case mathematically in the book. As you pointed out, the research suggests that some 91% of B2B purchases are at least influenced by word of mouth, so fundamentally every purchase. And so everybody knows it's important. Yet, somewhat mysteriously, nobody has an actual strategy for it. You got a strategy for everything. You got a sales strategy, you got a marketing strategy, you got a social media strategy maybe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You got a whole desk full of strategies. But the one strategy you don't have is a word-of-mouth strategy.
Right, because you hope it happens.
Yeah, we just assume it happens. We're like, well, yeah, our customers will talk about us. Of course they will. Well, why do you think that? And what exactly are they saying? And then when you give somebody the system necessary to have a word-of-mouth strategy, as we do in the book Talk Triggers, sometimes people are like, yeah, I should probably do that. But that kind of seems like a lot of work. I'm just going to buy some more ads, or I'm going to do whatever else. I'm going to make some extra calls, or whatever else they think they should do. But trust me when I tell you that mathematically, the best way to grow any business is for your customers to be the engine of that growth. And a Talk Trigger is one of the ways you make that happen.
So let's peel back the onion still further. And I know that I mentioned this to you, and I want to reinforce it yet again, because while you do have heads of distribution, national sales managers, divisional sales managers, regional sales managers that listen to this call and may be able to influence C-suite decisions about marketing, by and large, you have individual contributors that are listening to this call. Excellent B2B salespeople.
Which is great because they can figure it out themselves. They don't have to ask permission.
Exactly right. And what I want to be able to do with you, please, is offer them guidance about how they can develop their own talk triggers at a local level.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned there's 4 components, the 4 R's of a talk trigger.
These are 4 things that are non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. Your talk trigger must have all 4 of these things, because not everything you dream up can be a successful word-of-mouth strategy, right? Sometimes it just doesn't work, or it's too temporary, or what have you. So it has to be remarkable. We talked about that earlier. It has to be worthy of remark. Mm-hmm. It has to be a conversation worth telling. That's the first thing.
Yep.
Second thing is it has to be repeatable, and that's an important one. What I mean by that is everybody that you deal with, every customer, every prospect, however you want to structure it, but everybody in that particular circumstance has access to your talk trigger. It's not just for your best customers. It's not just on their birthday. It's not just on ladies' night. It's everybody. It's part of your operation. It's not a campaign. It's not a contest. It's not a short-time offer at the end of the quarter. It's how you do business.
And Jay, I want to interject something here, because wholesalers, if you have been following the bouncing ball and peerless value proposition, this is where these one of the intersections of these, because we talk about the fact that peerless value proposition is not a sales idea. Peerless value proposition is not a one and done. It is at the very fiber of who you are.
It's your DNA.
Correct. Exactly
your
correct.
Your DNA doesn't change week to week.
Exactly correct. So repeatable and remarkable. What would the third one be?
Third one is relevant. Okay, so we talked about the DoubleTree cookie example, right?
Yep.
So there's 14 brands in the Hilton portfolio. DoubleTree is just one of them. It's really important for those brands to have unique peerless value propositions. Otherwise, they compete against each other for the same guest, which is a real problem. So each hotel in the Hilton portfolio has their own brand. And DoubleTree's is the warm welcome. They want to own that 7-8 minutes from the time you set foot on premise to the time you set foot in your room. They want to be great at that. So they put more time, effort, money in lobby design than other hotels in that price point. They train the front desk staff more than a lot of the other hotels in that price point. And the cookie ceremony is a big part of that. So it's not just a pile of cookies on the counter. They take a cookie out of an oven. There's an oven in each hotel. They put the cookie in a paper sleeve. They turn and they hand it to you. It's a hand-to-hand pass. That's brand standard. It has to be a hand-to-hand pass. So warm welcome, warm cookie. It's relevant. It makes sense, you see. There's another, let me tell you a little story about a locksmith in New York City. His name is Jay Baer. And Jay is the highest-rated locksmith in Manhattan on Yelp. He's actually one of the highest-rated businesses in Manhattan, regardless of type of business, which is a pretty high bar to clear.
Definitely.
One of the reasons he's so popular is he has a great talk trigger. After he finishes working on your locks, Jay does, for free, a security audit of all the windows and doors in your location, for free. Pretty great. Terrific talk trigger. Makes sense, right? Locksmith, security audit. But imagine, Rob, that those two stories were reversed. Okay, so imagine Jay works on your locks and then says, "Hey, before
here's a cookie."
Right? Would you like a warm cookie I made in my locksmith van?
Exactly.
You'd be like, "No,
yes.
I don't want that."
Yes.
Or if you went to DoubleTree and they said, "Before you get to your room, would you like us to do a thorough security audit?"
Let's make sure your room is safe, shall we?
Yeah, you would say, "If that's necessary, I'd like to check out now."
Yes.
I have no part of that. So the talk trigger has to make sense. In fact, one of the things we do in my company on the consulting division is when we come up with ideas for talk triggers, we'll tell the story to a kid, like between 8 and 11 is about the right age for this, and then 3 days later we'll ask them to repeat the story. And if they can remember it and repeat it, it means that it's relevant and simple enough to work. Right?
One of the things that you said there that I really appreciated, and thinking about my experience in staying in a couple of DoubleTrees over time, is the notion of ceremony. Uh-huh. It wasn't as you said, a pile of cookies. It wasn't an "oh, by the way." There was a ceremony around it. There was a intention and purpose in the way it was delivered.
It's like a very fattening Japanese tea ceremony.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very Americanized
exactly.
in that way.
Yes, but you don't have to get on your knees, which is good.
That's also true.
Yeah,
also true.
Which is really good. All right, so we've got remarkable, we've got repeatable, we've got relevant, and what's the fourth one?
Is reasonable.
Now you say, by the way, that experiences that are too grand create suspicion. That's interesting.
Well, we have this tendency in business, especially in sales and marketing, to say, man, you know what? Attention is hard to come by. So what we should do to get attention is do something really, really big. And that's where you get, okay, here's what we're going to do. All the customers, put your name in a fishbowl, and we're going to draw one, and somebody is going to win an island. And you're like, wait, what? An island? It's too much. Like if I say to you, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, Oprah says that, right?
Oprah can only say that, yes.
You know who else can get away with that? Nopra.
Nopra, exactly. Nobody.
Nobody has that trust, right? So when the thing is too big, the conversation that it creates is around your terms and conditions and around there's no way that can be true, or when's the other shoe going to drop, or what's the catch? That's not the story you want told. So it's one of the mistakes people make when they're trying to create conversation is they think the only way they can create conversation is to shock and awe people, and it's the exact opposite, right? DoubleTree has been doing this successfully for 30 years, and it's just a chocolate chip cookie, right?
Yep.
It's not a Mercedes.
Yep.
It's not a Mont Blanc pen. It's a cookie. So it's not about how big the talk trigger is. It's about how consistently is it applied, and do people not expect it? It has to be something they don't expect. That's the key. So
we've got 5 types of of triggers that are,
Yes.
as you say, talkable. We don't have time for all 5. Wholesalers, I want you to go out and buy the book. I want you to go out and buy the book, and I want you to internalize not only the 4 R's, but also the 5 types of talk triggers. And then Jay's going to give you 6 steps. So it's 4, 5, 6. It's going to give you the 6 steps on how to put your own talk trigger together.
Yep.
But just to salivate a little bit over what the could-be's might be, give us an example of one of the talkable types.
So one of the ones that you can use, especially in B2B, it's the one that I use in my company, is talkable responsiveness. It's when you're just faster than customers expect you to be. Mm-hmm. So when customers email myself or my team, we email everybody back within 5 minutes, mm-hmm. and we return phone calls within 5 minutes, and we do that 16 hours a day, every day.
Yep. Wholesalers.
And as a high-dollar Fortune 500 consulting firm, yep. Nobody does that.
Yep, wholesalers.
We are literally the only one.
We've talked about this, Jay. We've talked about urgency is a differentiator, and urgency and the definition of urgency has changed over time.
In a lot of people's minds, speed equals caring.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if that's true, but that's how people interpret it.
That's okay. All that matters is what they think.
That's right. And I'm not saying that is your talk trigger or should be, but it's definitely one that you should ponder. The other one I would think about for wholesalers is talkable usefulness, when you're more useful than people expect you to be. And the way I would apply that is to take everything you know and give it away one bite at a time, mm-hmm. and make it your life's mission to educate your customer, whether they actually give you money for that or not.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The one you see most often, of course, is talkable generosity. That's the free cookie or the free security audit of your locks. That's the one that you'll notice most often in the wild because it's the easiest one to think through operationally, but it's not the only one. So generosity is the most common talk trigger, but by no means is it the only one. You can also use talkable attitude. You can also use talkable empathy. There's a number of, as you say, there's 5 different types, and there is no right answer. It's just the right answer for you.
See what he did there, wholesalers? He snuck all 5 in on you. There's empathy, generosity, speed, attitude, and usefulness. You'll learn more about those in the book. Jay, I want to talk about something that you mentioned, and that is creating and implementing a talk trigger. The secret ingredient is courage. And that rang loud bells for me. And again, I can't help but go back to the kissing cousin of this, which is the peerless value proposition. Yep. It all looks great on paper, but if you don't have the cojones to go out and do it, to buck convention about how business is usually done, then you will just continue to float along in the sea of sameness. Tell us about courage.
I mean, as we said, same as lame, right? I mean, it's easy, safe, and non-threatening to do what everybody else does. Mm-hmm. And one of the challenges I think that wholesalers will have with this premise is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, hey, we're making tons of money, it's all good. Well, we're headed for probably a downturn here, and when times are good, you might think, well, why would I spend the time to do some sort of word-of-mouth strategy when, I can't keep up with the clients I have today? Well, when times are not as good, what separates people are those who get their customers to do their sales and marketing for them. So if there's ever a time that you should treat word of mouth seriously, I think it's right now.
Yeah. I want to talk about one more thing before I let you go. And if I'm not mistaken, this was not in the book. One of the things that you do is that you invite your readers and listeners to send you information about talk triggers that they have seen, as you say, in the wild.
Yeah.
And shout out Bob Berg. I was listening to the Bob Berg podcast that you did. And if I'm not mistaken, again, it wasn't in the book. It came up as you surveyed or got feedback from listeners and readers. Dr. Snip.
Oh, so good.
Tell us more about Dr. Snip, if you would, please.
One of the things that's so fun about this, couple of things I'll talk about that. One, if you buy the book, and you can get it all the places and ways the book can be procured, including audiobook if you prefer to listen to it in the car, we'll put you in the Facebook group. So we have 500 people in the Facebook group so far. We sold a lot more books than that, of course, but people have said, yeah, I want to do it. And it's people just like the wholesalers who are listening who are putting their own talk triggers into practice right now, and it's a community that they're helping each other think through great ways to do this, which is really, really fun. And as part of that Facebook group, I keep getting these new ideas. People saying, oh, I tried this, I tried that, and have you heard about this one? It's like this rich vein of examples and frankly, comedy for me, which is great because I keep doing presentations about this around the world. So I was in, where I heard about this one first was in Seattle. I was doing an event for Chase Bank, And I finished my presentation. A guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, do you have any examples from Seattle?" And I said, "No, I don't, not that I'm aware of." He said, "Well, here's one that you might want to use." I said, "Great, tell me more." So there's a doctor here in town, all right, and he's a surgeon. Okay, he only does the vasectomy procedure. I'm like, all right, now I'm a little bit interested. Mm-hmm. He said, and his name is Dr. Snip. And I thought, oh, well, that's fantastic. He's like, but that's not the talk trigger. I'm like, it's not? He's like, no. And I'm like, well, then please tell me more. Of this story. Yes. Every single patient, every single day, again, the talk trigger must be repeatable. On the way out the door, they're given three things. They are given insurance paperwork. They are given post-operative instructions, like get the frozen bag of peas, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then each patient, as they depart, is given a small black box. Mm. And inside that small black box rests a tiny silver engraved pocket knife. And on that pocket knife, it says, Dr. Snip, vasectomy surgeon. Now, you can imagine, right? Birds of a feather, right? So you're watching football, you're playing golf, you're on your boat, you open a beer, and your buddy's like, Larry, that's a sweet knife, man. Where'd you get it? Like, where'd I get this knife? I got this knife at Dr. Snip, vasectomy surgeon. Aren't you and Sheila thinking about having a vasectomy, right? And so all of a sudden, this guy has a whole new round of patients. That is a damn good talk trigger.
That is a hell of a talk trigger right
yes.
there. And
yes.
lest we leave the conversation without identifying Jay Baer's talk trigger, what would your talk trigger be?
Well, it depends on which part of the business it is. So on the consulting side, it's absolutely the responsiveness, as I mentioned.
Personal.
We're super quick. On the speaking side of the business, it's suits. So I am known as the guy with super crazy plaid suits. I've got tons and tons of them, and that is kind of my signature on stage, and everybody expects it and looks for it and all that.
Which, by the way, not to go too deep into it again, buy the book, wholesalers. But your tailor has talk triggers.
It's one of the examples in the book.
It's crazy.
My suits, talk trigger.
I love that.
He's really great. He puts hidden messages in the suits. That's his thing. It's really fun. I will tell you that there's a talk trigger for two things. One, Bob Berg, terrific man, inducted in my same class in the Secret Hall of Fame this summer, which is a real honor. Bob says, and these are Bob's words, that Talk Triggers may be his favorite business book in history.
I know. You're bragging on yourself now. I know he said that.
He did say that. I didn't say that. Bob said that.
I know.
Bob's not young, so I'll take it.
Bob, are you listening?
He's a treasure. He's a gift to humanity. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. He is awesome. But the second thing I will tell you is that the book Talk Triggers, of course, has a talk trigger. That would be crazy if we didn't. Yep. The book has alpacas on the cover. So it's in all the airport bookstores now. So if you're on the road, you see a pink book with alpacas on the cover, you'll know it's the right book. But second, if you buy the book, and for whatever reason at all you don't like the book, if you go to talktriggers.com and leave me a note, Daniel and I will buy you any other book you want.
Yep.
Any book. It doesn't matter. You want a first edition Bible, we'll find a way to make that happen. So there's no risk in this book. That is one of our talk triggers.
Wholesalers, in case you're curious, we've done two podcasts with Bob Berg, the man of which we speak. So go look up those, because Bob is a remarkable human being and filled with knowledge, as was our guest today. Jay Baer, you have a resume long as my leg, and I run 6'3", so that's a pretty long resume. I appreciate the time that you have carved out to spend with us in between all of your other responsibilities. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. It was a real delight. We'll do it some other time again. I hope so.
I appreciate that. Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.